right. It is 7 o'clock and the board has returned to open session. First on our agenda this evening is a public hearing of the 2019 property tax levy. Is there a motion to open the hearing for the tax levy?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. So is there any,
Any discussion?
I'm sorry?
Any discussion?
Is there any discussion for the levy?
I think, as always, Jim did a good job in presenting the numbers and the derivation of how he got the proposed levy, and slightly over the limit so that we capture any new revenue, but the county will adjust it as appropriate. And so it reflects reasonable numbers.
All right.
But they would have the opportunity, yeah.
Okay, should we ask on that?
You can.
Is there any public comments specific to the levy? All right, so the levy, or the discussion is closed, or hearing is closed?
We need to adjourn it now.
Okay, then the public hearing for the 2019 property tax levy is adjourned.
We need a roll
A
call
roll
on that
call?
one.
Oh,
Yeah.
we have to, I'm sorry.
Motion.
Is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing for the 2019 property tax levy?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Margie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, then, next up is the public hearing on district e-learning. Is there a motion to open the public hearing on district e-learning?
So moved. Second.
Margie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Is there any discussion on the e-learning program?
We do have one other spot on the agenda for the board to discuss it under old business.
Is there any public comment on the e-learning program? All right. If there is no public comment, then is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the district e-learning?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. Then next is public comment. We have one individual signed up. Mr. Kleka?
Good evening, Glenn Kleka, 3640 McCormick, Brookfield, Illinois, Hollywood, Illinois. I just want to thank you, the superintendent, for attending the village board meeting in Brookfield, trying to open communications with them about the parking for that. It's very good that the Landmark has cooperated by giving us some reports in the newspaper too. Hope there's some signing of agreement with the Hollywood Community Association, and I hope, rather than renting space from the zoo, if they could just change that fire lane that's on Hollywood Avenue to open parking for, maybe permitted parking for the teachers only. There's plenty of space there. It's not used for anything other than, it says fire lane. If they need a true access fire lane, McCormick Avenue is available. The street goes right to their gates. The gates are just locked. All they have to do is unlock the gates. I don't see where it would cause any problems to the Hollywood community either, because all it would be is teachers walking back to the building as if they were parking in the zoo parking lot also. It'd be the same people walking by, other than outside the gates rather than inside the gates. It'd be a lot shorter distance too, because I don't know if they'd be putting in an access gate for people to exit through that west end of the parking lot. Otherwise, they'd have to go all the way to the entrance of the zoo to get out to come to that. I don't know if kind of running the shuttle or whatever. But the cheapest thing would be just changing the signs from fire lane to parking for teachers only, giving them a permit or whatever, and you'd have plenty of space. I'm glad to see that the communications are open. Hope the lease gets signed, and thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, is there any additional public comment? All right, we'll move to the next agenda item. At this time, are there any changes to the agenda?
I'd like to make one change to the agenda, and it's not a substance change. As you know, we have a lot of policies to discuss tonight. I've gone through the policies and sort of broken them into two sections, minor, what I consider sort of minor changes being just footnote changes, minor grammatical changes. I'd like to break that into, and then more major or substantive changes. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through and discuss the minor changes first, approve those, and then if we can go through the more substantive changes. So if you look at the policy, what I'd like to do is I'd like to discuss everything up through essentially N. So policy 5:30, hiring process and criteria. That's where I'd like to start the major. So pretty much everything above that, I'd like to discuss first, and if we could vote on that, and then go and discuss that.
That's fine.
All right. I asked for a consensus. Do we need to vote on that, or is everyone okay with making that change? Yep, okay. All right, thanks for the suggestion, David. So then at this time, we will go to the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Dan. And I am going to turn it over to Casimir Gorman, who's the principal at Blythe Park Elementary School. So, as you figured out, I guess the crowd wasn't here for the tax levy or the economic hearing, so I think they're here for Blythe Park. So, welcome, Casimir.
Good evening, board members. Tonight, Blythe Park School is showcasing our students' writing. And so in the presentation this evening, you will see writing across genres and for a variety of purposes. The teachers and I also thought it was important to show you the progression of writing. So beginning with our very earliest learner in an oral narrative and developing throughout the grade levels. So in our presentation, you can look for examples of narrative, expository, and persuasive writing, but you can also look for writing techniques, poetic devices, examples of dialogue and imagery. So it should be a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I have a number of our students here who contributed to our presentation. So I'm going to ask those students to come up and just say their first name and their grade level. So boys and girls, if you want to come up right now. And Aiden, if we can start with the older children first, so you can be models for the younger. All right. Okay.
I'm Aiden, and I am in 5th grade. I'm Elsie, and I'm in 3rd grade. I'm Sonia, and I'm in 3rd grade. I'm Greta, and I'm in 2nd grade. I'm Anna, and I'm in 4th grade. I'm Lillian, and I'm in kindergarten. I'm Olivia, and I'm in 1st grade. I'm Sienna, and I'm in 1st grade. I'm Veda, and I'm in 1st grade. I'm Patrick, I'm in preschool.
He's in preschool. I also want... one more. Oh, Winter. Come here. Winter, right here.
My name is Winter, and I'm in kindergarten.
I also want to thank Erin Depke. She is our math interventionist, and she was instrumental, and she put the video together, and it's really wonderful. So I want to give her credit for that. And we have a number of our teachers here who are here as well. So.
Support all the writing.
Yes.
Alligator a bagel by Patrick. You an alligator a bagel. You ask for some cream. He bugs built a lot of floor. We will go to the beach. You'll be with Mom and Dad and Sister and brother. You'll get back and bring your stuff back from the beach. Spill some sand on the floor. That will remind them of the cream. Cheers in the heart and in the cream. He will ask for a bagel. Bear facts by Lillian. Cubs are cute. Bears have to travel for food. Bears have to dig for shelter. Bear facts by Winter. Bears have birds. Bears are fast. Mama Bear protects the cubs. Dear Miss Gorman, I think having school all the time is not good because we want to spend time with our family. Also because you have to take a break. Also, you can get exercise out of school. From Olivia. Dear Mrs. Gorman, I think we should not have school on the weekend. For example, I have swim class on Saturdays. And if I have school on Saturdays, I won't know how to swim. Also, I would like to play with my toys, such as Polly Pockets. Another example is I would like to have more time with my mom and dad. That is why we should not have school on the weekend. From Sienna. Solving word problems by Veda and Greta. There were 282 people in the park on Sunday afternoon. In the evening, 199 people went home. How many people were left in the park? We had the whole and one part. To find the other part, we needed to subtract. How Veda and I got the answer 83 was first, we knew that you cannot take 9 away from 2. So next we looked at the tens place and also knew you could not take 9 away from 8. Then we looked at the hundreds place and knew that you can take 1 away from 2. But then we thought about the things we could not do. So we crossed out the 2 in the hundreds place and put a 1 above it and carried the 1 to the 8. And made 18. But we still have to fix the 1. So last, we crossed out 18 and subtracted 1. And made 17 and carried the 1 and made 12. Finally, we knew that 12 minus 9 equals 3, and 17 minus 9 equals 8, and 1 minus 1 equals 0. That's how we got the answer 83. The Stolen Horse by Elsie. One day I was riding my horse Captain. He is all white. My sister Margot is riding her horse Cody. He is tan and white. One of my other friends, Autumn, was riding one of my other horses because she doesn't have her own horse. She was riding Cricket. He is all white. Margot has dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. She is annoying and I'm being annoying. Autumn has snowy blonde hair and hazel eyes. She is shy and kind. I am kind, smart, good with horses, and funny. I have dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. After we rode around for a while, we put the horses away and walked to my grandparents' house to talk and play. It was getting late, so we walked Autumn home. We played Monopoly with my grandma, Mom, and Dad. When we were done playing, I told them how much fun we had with Autumn. After we talked a while, we went to bed. It was 8:15 when my alarm went off in the morning. I went to the barn to see the horses. When I got to the barn, I saw Captain got in his stall. I looked in the other horses' stalls, and they were still there, but where was Captain? I looked outside the barn to see if he got out in the middle of the night. I went back in my grandparents' house to tell them what happened. Margot rushed to the barn to see if Cody was there, which he was. I asked my dad if I could go out with Margot and try to find Captain. He asked us if we wanted breakfast first. We were hungry, so we said yes. We had waffles and milk. Grandpa made Canadian waffles and Grandma's cow milk we made the best milk. It was so good I almost forgot that Catherine is still missing. Coco by Sony. One day I was walking with Mark and Mike. Mike has brown hair and brown eyes. His best friend's name is Mark. Mark has brown hair and blue eyes. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and my name is Sony. Mike said, "Hey guys, do you want to go to my grandma's home this week?" He said, "We are going to ask our mom and dad." When I got home, I asked my parents if I could, and they said yes. After a second, my mom said, "Time to go to bed." I ran upstairs and went to bed. The next morning when I woke up, I got dressed and then ran to Mike's house and hopped in the car. After about 2 hours, we arrived at the car. Mike's grandma showed us where we could sleep and made us snacks. After we finished eating, Mike wanted to show us the racer's photo. So we headed off to the stage. When we got to her hall, we saw that she was not there. We did not think it was that much of a deal until Mike's grandpa said she should be there. We knew that we had to find Coco. Ready to Build a Snowman by Anna. Have you ever made a snowman? Amelia and I have compared and contrasted two wonderful and amazing snowmen. The two snowmen have a lot of similarities and differences. Amelia's snowman and my snowman have a lot of similarities. For example, Amelia and I both have wonderfully colored polka dot patterns. She and I have them on our scars and legs. Amelia and I also have the same type of hat. We both have stocking caps. Amelia's snowman is colored with a beautiful cherry blossom red and a pretty snow white, and my snowman is colored with a sunny yellow and flower-like. But both snowmen have really vibrant colors to them. They look super cool and fun together. Amelia's snowman and my snowman also have a lot of differences. For example, Amelia's snowman has 4 pieces of coal. However, mine only has 3 pieces of coal. Amelia's coal is colored with a dark gray that looks like clouds on a rainy day. On the other hand, my snowman has black coal, like the night sky. Amelia and I also don't have the same type of nose. Amelia has a bright red cloud nose that looks like plum tomatoes. However, I have a carrot nose that is orange as the sunset. In conclusion, Amelia's snowman and my snowman are different and similar in many. Have a lot of fun building snowmen outside. Basketball by Eden. The ball is up. It's high in the air. It's coming down with a frightened stare. It's coming for something. It's coming fast. But how long will this falling last? And then he felt it with a sublime splash. Swoosh, the ball came. It came in fast. The ball is going up and down. It's bouncing, bouncing, hand to ground. But suddenly it's stolen. No! But now it's not being dribbled low. The ball is coming up and high. It gets slammed down in the rim. Goodbye. Now it's rolling on the ground. It's close. It's close. It's out of bounds almost. It's being dived at, but now it's out of bounds. Adios.
And then we just have one more. Since they showed snippets of the students' writing, we put a book together for each one of you that has all the examples of their writing.
Oh, thank you. Great.
Thank you. That is great. It's definitely great.
Did anyone have any questions or comments? That was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic, guys.
Yes.
I also note, the guys, I don't know if you know that all the students in the state take a test, right? You guys, your second graders and third graders and fourth graders and fifth graders, you all take a test, right, for the end of the year to see how much you learned. And I don't know if you guys know this, but your guys' test at Blythe School for reading and writing were some of the highest scores in the state of Illinois. You had scores like 80% or meeting expectations, which is amazingly good scores. So you guys should be really proud of yourselves. I mean, it's not the only reason you should be proud of yourselves, but it shows that you're doing a lot of things right. So that's really great.
I thought it was really neat to see I have a 15-year and a 6-year-old, and coming back to that first grade time again, you don't realize how much the teachers do in first grade and even in the kindergarten, teaching those, I'm probably not saying it right, those for example and those connection little pieces that you saw in the writing and just the compare and contrasting. So I think it's just wonderful, and you could use those skills in science, compare and contrasting research, and they've already started. So well done. They're really creative, just beautiful stories. So.
And thanks for all coming and putting it all together in a way that was really interesting to see the progression from grade level to grade level. So
Thank you
great.
for having us. I think it's a great job.
I know probably a lot of kids need to go home and go to bed.
Yes.
It's been a busy week for everybody, I think. All right, and I'll continue on. The next thing on the superintendent's report is just an update on our playground steering committee. So the playground steering committee had our first meeting on this past Monday, the 16th. And I just want to let you know how it was a great first meeting. We have great representation from across the district. PE teachers, social workers, elementary and intermediate teachers, a physical therapist, our social workers, 3 parents on the committee, had several teachers and the principals at each of the schools at Ames and at Hollywood. Right now the playground committee is dedicated to the development of the playground ideas for Ames and Hollywood specifically. We keep saying we'll get to the central Hauser campus planning at a later date. But anyway, really exciting, a lot of passion, a lot of excitement. Teachers who stayed till 5:15 for that meeting were thanking me at the end, saying thanks for including them and their involvement. So more to follow on that as the information progresses. I will probably make that a new business discussion item for more detail for the board in January to talk more about timelines and beginning to think about costs, et cetera. So more to follow on that, but wanted to let you know we have kicked that process off officially, and we're going to actually be doing focus groups with students on Friday, January 10th as well at Ames and at Hollywood. So I know they will give us a lot of great ideas as well. The other thing that I know, something that the board continues to be updated on, and I think it's an important conversation within the community as well, and we know the Landmark has been covering this, is the ongoing conversations related to the Hollywood School facility considerations, both related to building the addition and playground improvement. So we are continuing to work with the HCA, with the village, and now also with the zoo, has expressed some interest in possibly helping us out with some parking solutions. So we do have a lease that is in our form, a sort of final consideration draft lease to be presented to the HCA. So I anticipate sharing that with them in the next couple days. I know with the holidays right here on the horizon, I'm not exactly sure when they'll get back to us, but hoping by perhaps our January or February board meeting, we would have responses from the HCA to look at and consider. So again, it's a very much an evolving process, working kind of with all of our neighbors in the community there, with our goal of separating play and parking and being able to build the addition and improve the playground. So continuing to work on that. I feel like things are starting to coalesce a little bit in a way that's starting to feel exciting. So any questions or comments about that?
Just that one comment. First of all, I'm really happy that you got the playground committee kicked off and that things are going well. And I thank Leslie for participating in that. It's good to have a board member there on doing that. I just want to say that I'm glad we're going to be talking about this in January, because I do think we have to think long and hard about the timeline to give ourselves adequate time to basically do a really good job, which I think we did. We know we're spending an entire year on the Hauser Central Campus planning. So try to compress the other, playgrounds into a month or two. I think we might not give ourselves enough time to do the kind of job that I think we should do. The other consideration there is, and we can talk more about this in January, is that just the synergies in terms of cost. We're going to be doing Hauser and Central in 2021. It might make sense to do the other outdoor spaces at the same time rather than stagger them, since there is no synergy with the construction of the building. So I think there's a number of things we need to think about. So I'm glad we're getting that thing going.
No, I'm glad this is going. It's finally coming to fruition. I mean, I guess the thing is that I think it's important to make sure that we know about is the timeline that we are pushing up against our construction timeline, and that I'm glad we're going to be submitting the lease to the HCA, and hopefully we can hear from them soon. But we are, again, the construction timeline, we've got bids out. It's to include it, the Hollywood School, but we need to make sure that we can move on this quickly so that we can move forward with this. I also would like to say that, this is part of a big puzzle. And HCA is part of the puzzle. The zoo is now part of the puzzle. Brookfield's now part of the puzzle. I mean, I appreciate hearing from the community about this, but now we're doing what we can. Those other parties need to also hear from the community, and so I'd encourage others to express their interest to Brookfield, and other parties, to let them know your feelings. We obviously know your feelings. We'd like to make sure they know what their feelings are.
All right, and I think that was my final item on the superintendent's report.
Okay. All right, then. We'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Would the board secretary like to read out tonight's consent agenda?
Tonight's consent agenda includes meetings of previous minutes from November 20th, 2019, closed session 1, November 20th, 2019, regular business meeting, November 20th, 2019, closed session 2, December 2nd meeting, minutes of the special meeting closed session, December 4th minutes of closed session 1, December 4th minutes of the special meeting and committee of the whole meeting, and December 4th, 2019 minutes of the closed session number 2. As well as the personnel report as presented, payables pre-list from December 3rd, 2019, and payables pre-list from December 18th, 2019.
Okay. At this time, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Margie, can you call the roll?
It's like a game.
We give everyone buzzers?
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. So next on the agenda is the Riverside Education Council. No? Nothing tonight? All right, and we'll move to board member comments. Are there any board member comments?
Yeah, I went to the Central Elementary holiday program that Mr. House puts on, and it's been really cool because lately he's been incorporating over the past 3 years rhythm elements with clapping and xylophones and bells, and he's been doing it for a few years now. I don't know if those of you remember, there were drums that were purchased a few years ago, and they've really been put to use, so he's amazing, and the amount of complicated patterns they learned was impressive, and it's wonderful. Even if you don't have kids there, it's just amazing to see him put hundreds of kids and rotate them on stage and all by himself.
That's a feat in of itself right there.
But no, they're happy and they knew what they were doing, and it was really excited. It was exciting to watch them progress. So.
And no, I was also I was at the Hauser Orchestra as well as the Hollywood Holiday Concert. And I have to echo what Sherry said. The music was great, but I do have to say, hands off to Mr. House to coordinating all those kids, getting them on, especially the kindergarten. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
So.
I was also at the Hauser Orchestra, and I'm amazed by how well those kids perform. The program was really interesting. It was a bunch of different pieces that I'd never heard before, all very well done.
Mm-hmm.
And to see the progression from the 6th grade to 8th grade is really amazing. I think Miss Ferguson, and who's the choral director? Is it
Johnston?
Yeah,
Johnston? They did a fantastic job on that, so really very enjoyable.
So it hasn't happened yet, but it's happening tomorrow, and I'll probably forget.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, the Ames kids are coming here actually to be in the auditorium, which I think the parents will appreciate.
That'll
not
be
being
cool.
crammed in the gym over
Yeah.
there at. But maybe next year we'll be happy to be in our own place. But the kids are really jacked up about it. So it should be a good show tomorrow.
Oh, I would like to mention one thing. We are not District 208. However, I went to a chamber orchestra concert there. My daughter's in that program, and it's just really neat. I think it's encouraging that our Hauser students are so well prepared. If they continue to the high school level, they're actually doing very difficult chamber music, which is not an easy feat with multiple parts and 5 people all intertwined. And I think Ms. Ferguson and Ms. Gill just did an amazing job when she was here preparing them, because they really do transition very well. And they have a new orchestra teacher there who seems to be doing, a good job getting used to everybody, and it's really fun. So I think it's encouraging that we have this everyday program that they can really progress. So.
Just a brief comment moving on from the arts. I'm not sure if this is when this happened. I went to my last District 96 students parent-teacher conference with my student recently, 8th grade, and I was really walking in there hoping to hear some things that I've been saying at home reiterated, and it was just really great to see his team of teachers know him so well. I didn't even have to say any of my concerns, because they just were able to sit down and talk to him and say, this is what we need to do, and this is, and pumping him up while also giving him some constructive feedback moving on to high school. So I walked out of there incredibly impressed. So hats off to Hauser's team.
I probably could have said this when Martha and David talked about the Hollywood House and the Village of Brookfield, but Dave and I were there at the Village Board meeting last Monday when their board discussed the parking, and their board, much like ours, has different thoughts and different opinions on things, but I think in general there's certainly a willingness to work and look at options with us. And the Landmark just had an article about that, but I was pleased to hear that they would consider it, and certainly most had a good open mind towards supporting us, and I think we've got some options to move forward to make the parking situation better.
All right, if there's nothing else, then we'll move on to committee reports. First up is the Finance Committee.
I spoke to Mr. Fitton and last week about the levy, and I don't think there's really anything new for several months. So, and that was pretty much it. Wasn't that the only topic that was on there? I think that was the only major thing, right?
Yep. The only other thing coming up is that pay back the loan
from the transportation fund, right? So that was all for finance.
Okay. Then next up is the Policy Committee.
I'm going to save my time.
Yeah.
Gentleman yields his time back to the...
That's an interesting connection.
Exactly.
They called it, my daughter calls it a connection, and I just realized that it's such an important word for, yeah.
Okay, then next is the Education Committee.
Okay, we heard from Ms. Dolzel about the e-learning days that we're going to be talking about soon, so I'd encourage any of the community members to, let us know your thoughts, and we'll be talking about it soon later this meeting, so I don't want to go into too much detail yet, but we did discuss it and have a presentation in the last meeting, which you can check out on Board Book if you want any more details. So.
All right. In the Personnel Committee.
So this time of year it's hard to find a date that works for everybody with everything going on, but we settled on a date for January 2nd. Actually, we're going to get together and talk about a couple different topics. Similar things I mentioned, I think it was like 2 months ago, last time we met, work from home for some of the district staff. We recently, with the superintendent, trying to shore up some of the feedback mechanisms that we have and some things like that and a couple other topics. So if there's anything else that you guys, that's popped up on your guys' radar and you have any suggestions for us, please let me or Jill know.
Okay. And we have a special bullet for the Facilities Committee.
I was like, wow, Joel.
I feel special. That's always good.
Yeah, what's that?
Name and bold.
The facilities plan for all 4 schools were advertised early this month. And so the contractors will all have an opportunity to review those, submit bids to us and the construction manager. The finance committee and I and Jeff will be meeting with Ramesh and at Vistara and Martha to review those bids, and then we'll present to the full board on the next regular business meeting. And we did just receive a report from the play space site design.
Lakota Group
Lakota
and Guelph
Group.
Hamilton.
I have not reviewed that report in detail yet, so I don't have. But it was distributed to the rest of the board as well.
So it's just a first summary of their analyze and engage portion of that, and so we'll be bringing that to Facilities Advisory Committee and then back to the full board. And it's kind of the broad scope of the realm of possibilities and ideas to be considered as we move forward. But it is exciting. I think they captured kind of the questions, concerns, and some ideas around the space here on the Central Hauser campus. So more to follow on that for sure.
All right. And we will move to old business. The first item in old business is the District 96 2019 tax levy. Is there a motion to approve the District 96 2019 tax levy as presented?
So moved.
Second. All right, is there any further discussion on this?
This levy is consistent with the previous few that I've been a part of, and we levy to the maximum, but the maximum is rate of inflation. So it's a fair increase, and it captures hopefully any new developments. It's clear and concise in the board documents in terms of how it's developed and where those numbers come from. And I encourage anyone to review those first before you have too many questions.
Yeah, I agree with the points Joel just made, the ones that he made earlier. Mr. Fitton's done a good job in presenting the material very clearly. It's very important to realize, as Joel alluded to, our levies have increased slower than the rate of inflation over the last 6 or 7 years, because we did not capture everything that we could have in some of those years for other reasons. So obviously, that at some point that will be an issue, but they're not increasing, faster than inflation. So just so people know that in real dollars, they're flat.
I just have a couple of slides to show you, since we won't be back to talking about the tax levy till November, so.
It's 2020.
I remind you that most of our revenue comes from our tax levy. So this is just a pie chart of our revenue in this year's budget, and 86% of our operating revenue comes from property taxes. This is a picture of part of the certificate of tax levy. See in the bottom right, we're levying for a little over $26 million, which is about 2.5% higher than the previous year's extension. And it's mostly due to inflation, and then we built a little in for new property that should come on the tax rolls according to the assessor. And this certificate here shows you the amounts that's levied in each fund. And just to recap the timetable, this is the last step for the board for now. After it's approved tonight, and I'll make sure it's filed by the last Tuesday of December, which is the 31st this year. And then when the tax bills go out, the estimated tax bills will go out, and then the revenue will start coming in March. Well, any questions on the tax levy? Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just want to just make one more comment on the same topic of inflation, which is that the 1.9%, so the 2.58% that Mr. Fitton referred to capture the new construction, just to be totally clear, on existing properties, that the most it can be in aggregate is 1.9%. The rest of that is only to capture if there's a new
business or a new house or something of that nature. So for the existing property, it's inflation at most. Yeah.
Definitely a good point to note. All right, let's see, at this time, Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, then next up is the District 96 e-learning plan. Is there a motion to approve the District 96 e-learning plan as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have some bullet points. Is there discussion? Or here she comes.
I know here she comes. Here comes Angela.
Did you want to start? Or?
You go ahead.
So I know that there were some questions that we had when it was presented, when the e-learning plan was presented at the beginning of the month and December 4th. And so we went back as a team and talked about some of those concerns that were brought up at the table and flushed out ways to address those. So I could start with that and recap a little bit of the e-learning plan. So the e-learning plan is a proposed plan that we're looking at for how District 96 might utilize, account for, structure, monitor, and communicate e-learning days in the event of an emergency closing, whether that's for weather or some other necessity. On July 1st, 2019, Governor Pritzker had signed into law Public Act 101-0012, which is what allowed all Illinois school districts to utilize up to 5 e-learning days in lieu of the 5 emergency days that are on an approved Illinois State Board of Education calendar. However, while we're allowed up to those 5 days, you will see in the resolution that we are only proposing up to 2 days possibly being utilized for an e-learning day. Should we utilize an e-learning day, the students, families, staff would be notified of the e-learning day through our normal emergency closure notification. So that would be through email that's shot out through PowerSchool or School Messenger, through a phone blast that comes from the phone numbers on record in PowerSchool, as well as through the website where we announce closings for emergency where we announce the emergency closings. We'd also announce the utilization of an e-learning day if that was the case. We know that our students in grades 5 through 8 receive Google Chromebooks at the beginning of the school year. We know that our middle school students are in theory bringing the Chromebooks home every day. So we have students in grades 5 through 8 who have access to district-issued Google Chromebooks. We also plan to have all materials that are necessary to complete the learning experiences available as paper materials. And the paper materials would be for students and families without internet access, for students not in possession of their district-issued Google Chromebook, or in possession of a district-issued Google Chromebook, and for families whose devices may not be accessible on that day. One of the things that was brought up is that some families utilize parents' phones as pretty much their primary device, and so those families would also receive paper copies in advance of the district e-learning day. Additionally, what we would put in place is the ability to adjust due dates for e-learning assignments. So according to the plan, students would turn in their e-learning assignments the day that we return from the emergency closing day. If students did not have internet access, if they didn't have access to begin with, or if the emergency closing caused a lack of internet access, or if a family just requests an extension, we are flexible in the due date for the assignments. You'll also see in the resolution that it specifically states that no one will be penalized for lack of access. Our staff utilized collaborative professional development time so that we were able to talk through the details of expectations for e-learning days. Our students will be trained throughout a school day on e-learning procedures, where to find their assignments, how to contact their teachers, what assignments they would be doing, how to choose their assignments in some cases. Additionally, we're posting tutorial videos on the website for parents and students to access, as well as for staff members to access for uploading their lessons. Our teachers have worked to create meaningful teaching experiences for two e-learning days that are aligned to standards and connected to students' units of study. I think about a specific example in 4th grade, where 4th graders work on fractions, and on their e-learning choice board, one of the assignments is to make a recipe at home with a family member, utilizing fractions to multiply or reduce that recipe. So looking at ways to have it meaningful life-type lessons, not necessarily driven by textbook, but fractions are a 4th grade standard, and so they're still working on a standards-aligned lesson. The students will access their lessons through Google Classroom, Seesaw, district webpage, or hard copies as needed. They'll complete their assigned lessons to be turned in on the first day that they return back from the learning day. Again, though, due dates can be adjusted as needed. Our pre-K students, we've worked on completing learning activities that are at a pre-K developmental level. Our elementary students will complete lessons in a language arts lesson, a math lesson, science and social studies lessons, as well as a lesson for the special area class they would have had that day. And 5th grade band or orchestra students would have a lesson as well. Our junior high students would complete a lesson for each core area, a physical education lesson, and the encore classes that they have in their schedule. We do recognize our special education students, our English language learners, and students who see the reading interventionist and or math interventionist have different needs. And so those teachers have worked on lessons that are appropriate for their students and have worked with Jason Smith on how they can individually assign those lessons to their students. And those students would then do that lesson in place of that core subject lesson that the teacher assigned. So if I work with a math interventionist, I wouldn't do the math lesson assigned to the whole class or whole grade level. I would do the lesson assigned by my math interventionist. Prior to an e-learning day, prior to the e-learning day, and we're shooting for the next couple of days, students will be aware, we'll be sure students are aware of their Google Classroom logins, Seesaw, and or RasKid if necessary. Should we implement an e-learning day, the lessons will be active on the website and in Google Classroom by 8:30 in the morning, and teachers will be available to answer questions via email, Google Classroom, Seesaw as applicable, from 8:30 to 1:30. And then following the e-learning day, we'll survey staff, parents, and students to allow for the review and revision of the program as needed. And we're going to determine the attendance rate, or the percentage of students who turned in completed work. And what we would determine as a success rate, what I did was I went back to the past 2 years and looked at our attendance rate on the emergency days we utilized at the end of the year. And I averaged our attendance for those days. In 17-18, we had 1 day that we utilized at the end of the year. And in 18-19, we had 3 days that we utilized. And the average attendance was 95%. So success for an e-learning day would be if our attendance matched what we were doing at the end of the year for the past 2 years, so we'd look for 95% attendance. Questions?
I appreciate the work that you went through and the changes that were made to really try and figure out how to make this work. And it'll be fascinating to see if it gets implemented due to weather and see how the students respond and parents.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you guys have a lot of thought into this. I appreciate the fact that you're extending the due dates for people.
Yeah.
That's, I think, very important. And the fact that they're not going to penalize, especially in this trial phase, I think that's good. And I do even like the fact, I especially like the fact that you're measuring success and determining what success is beforehand. So it would be very interesting. I do have a question, though, about that success. Is that success, are you determining they hand it in regardless if it's the day after or the extended time?
Yes.
Okay. So it's both. So if they hand it in period by like the last due date, essentially?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. No, I think that's good.
No, I appreciate all the changes too, that like thinking about possible scenarios and what do you do with this child or who has access and what the teachers did individually. The only limiting factor that worries me is just the logins. Like, making sure all that, because the teacher is supposed to make sure everyone knows their login, and it's like so hard to get everybody to do that. So I'm sure you'll be on top of it. I could just see that being a limiting factor, just making sure, because there's a lot of passwords even for us grown-ups to memorize, and making sure they know how to get in. So.
And should there be problems, don't forget that you can reach out to the teachers
right.
too.
I was just thinking, in case there's like a grandma watching and they have no idea, you know. So I'm sure you'll figure that out. But thank you for all the help and details that we're working on from the last time. So thank you.
Yes, I agree with whatever people have said here. It's been a very clear presentation. I guess I have one question and one comment. The question is, I know that I think last time you said one of the reasons to consider that this program for this coming year is because of our construction schedule, that if we don't want to have, we want to be able to start construction as soon as the school year ends, we don't want to push that out. But is there a reason, aside from that, tangible reason, which might not apply in other years, is there, what is the rationale for doing this? Other than the fact we can do it, we certainly legally can do it, and technologically we can do it possibly. But what's the learning reason for doing it?
A couple of thoughts behind it are that when we do come back in June, when we have to make up those days, a lot of the curriculum has stopped. We've turned in technology. Some families have scheduled vacations, so they're not attending school at that time. This helps learning stay continuous and stay connected to what's happening in the schools during that time. Another reason that would make this a draw versus not utilizing it and waiting until June is that we are able to then not have to go further into June for using those emergency days, because the students aren't as engaged on those days. The ones that are coming in, they're checked out. Our 8th graders are not in school at that time anyhow, so they're just extra days that they're at home and not working. And then as we extend the day, the other piece of that is we run into the different summer camps and summer programs possibly, depending on how far in we have to go. So it eliminates some of those end of the year things that happen by allowing us to utilize it during the year.
Okay, great. No, that all makes sense to me. That sounds very promising. And I like the idea of experimentation. I think we don't do enough of that in education, so I like this sort of this an experiment. I think that's good from that point of view. My one comment is that, and this is not a criticism, it's just a thought, is that I remember when I was a kid, a snow day was like this sort of wonderful event. It was a random thing that occurred in the winter. You had the day off, and you can go outside. And it's, in a way, I feel bad for the kids, because it sounds silly, right? It sounds like, okay, this is a ridiculous reason. But nonetheless, I feel bad that they won't have that experience, possibly, because we are now being more efficient and all the other, for the reasons you mentioned, good reasons, only not bad, but it does, it is a loss in a way. We have to recognize, I think there's a loss there, especially, I'm talking about the younger kids, I'm not talking about the middle school, the first graders and the second graders.
No, I think I can see that, but if I recall, the last couple of emergency days were
cold.
They were cold.
Yeah. So nobody's going outside.
My kids didn't go out.
I have seen a bunch of middle schoolers sledding their little hearts out, though. So
It might be fun to work in your pajamas, though.
yeah.
All right.
I mean, based on the example, maybe they do go outside and they just have to
Maybe, yeah.
worry about math while they're out.
There we are.
Yeah, no, exactly. You don't know where you're going to be doing
Perfect
your
proportions to their snowballs.
Snowman proportions. Yeah.
I do have just one question, and just sort of want to propose this. I do know legally we're allowed to do 5, and we're doing 2. I'm just wanting to know what's the thought of maybe increasing that number. Seeing that we're just doing this temporarily, let's just increase that number so we have a better understanding of how this is working. I'm not saying maybe use the full 5, but maybe increase it to 3 or 4, especially considering that we are approaching construction. And this is just a trial period right now, and we can see.
I would be very concerned if the first day is just a, catastrophe. It doesn't work, and 2 days later we have another one, and the team hasn't had time to sort through why this didn't work and why this one's effective. I don't know if I'd want to say, yeah, let's do more of those. If, for me, I feel like because it is, we're testing this out, we're trying to see if this is an effective practice in our district. I don't want to I personally like the idea of just maxing it at 2 and then analyzing and making sure that, kids are learning, academics are going on during that day.
I'm not sure. I think over the last 10 years, the most we've ever had was last year. I can't remember a snow day for the, I know.
Make sure you don't say anymore.
I'm just saying, I only have a freshman, and that's that many years ago, but I cannot remember more than a handful of times we've ever had a snow day. And yet last year was very unusual.
The first snow day this year is going to be made up on President's Day.
Absolutely.
If we have a snow day. I hope we don't ever even
Before
have to talk about this.
Right.
But, so we already have one day built in.
Yeah, I'm not
So
sure
that's
it's
really-
practical to build in those extra days. And having heard from the high school parents that did it last year, those of you that talked, I kind of like the number 2. I think it's a decent trial number for us to get an idea. So that's just how I feel. But
I think if we go through it and it's very successful, and next year we feel that it's something we can implement, if snow days come up, I would be really comfortable.
I think 2 was the consensus of the board last time when we spoke of it. So. And I agree. I think as a trial, as an experiment, it's a good number to collect information, collect feedback from, and see how things go.
and that's how the resolution's written anyway. So
Right, no,
Yeah.
I mean, right, no, I understand that. And the reason I proposed that is because there was obviously a lot more thought that went into it than when we discussed it the first time. They've included things here that we didn't necessarily discuss before, so that's why I asked that question.
Just one clarification for myself. So these assignments are already created, like they're ready to
Yes.
go?
Yes.
Because as I was reading, it said, prior to a snow day and stuff. So essentially, if we know 3 days from now, there's potential for 8 inches of snow or something, like we can already kick
I'm
this in
going to
motion.
backtrack on that.
Okay.
The pre-K through 5th grade lessons are already created.
Okay.
The middle school teachers, when Jason Smith and I met with the middle school teachers, they actually prefer to post it the day that the emergency day is called. That way it truly is within the context of what they're learning, and they have the ability to do that because they function with Google Classroom and it's something their kids are already using. So middle school students are not posted yet or created yet because it will fall in line with this is the next day of school, this is what we would have done in class.
Okay. So as far as like paper copies being ready for the kindergarten of 5th graders,
Yes.
I think is what you just said. Like they could actually give those paper copies out and everything. Okay. I was reading through trying to figure out how that was going to work. I didn't realize this was already created. So okay.
Further questions? Any further discussion? You ready to vote? All right, Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, we are coming to the highlight of the evening.
Yes.
So we're going to speak of the IASB Press Plus 102 update memo. Is there a motion to approve the Press Plus 102 Group 1 policies as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's see, shall we go ahead and read them? Read them all?
Do I need to read them again? Or?
Right, well, we can discuss them, I guess.
Yeah, I guess are there any discussions related? to
Right, no, right. I didn't know if I mean to read like I did the
titles?
the first time. So what I'd like to do is if we can just, like I mentioned earlier, if we can go ahead and discuss pretty much all the way down to item M. And if there's any discussion on any of those that people have. Like I said, most of those deal with just sort of footnote changes. Some of them are, they tighten things up a little bit more. And so, I mean, for example, like policy 4:15, identity protection. The only change there is they're adding protections for grant awards. Before there wasn't grant awards. So does anyone have any questions on those policies, or?
Could we talk a little bit on the one with the option, the yes or no option?
We're not there yet, are we?
Those are in the more substantive.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we said we're through N. I apologize, I thought we were including that one.
No, not up to M, not N.
Oh, M, I misheard you, I apologize.
No.
I don't have any questions. They're all very straightforward.
yeah, that was not a difficult bunch.
I thought it was, if you look at sorry. The revenue and investments one,
Yes.
it's an interesting addition to, and I'm not even, I can't address what kind of an impact it would have, but they add a whole bunch of new non-financial factors to investment decisions.
What essentially what that change there is, it's more saying that part of our investments and how we invest, we consider socially responsible investing. It doesn't say we have to do it, it's just saying we now consider it as part of when we go through and make decisions on what to invest.
Yeah, and I understand that, and that is a current, that's becoming a little bit more common. I just thought it was interesting that it was added.
But as a matter of practice, Mr. Fitton, we have no control whatsoever over
I was also going to note that
So we
it's,
basically, it's on our
Right.
hands, right?
yeah, it's the township treasurer who actually does this.
So there's no discussion on, should we just vote on the ones here?
So I think we specified as group 1, which goes through M. For those who didn't hear it, and me included, going through M. All right. Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Clyber?
Aye.
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, so the next section, Dan, as you were mentioning before, is 5:30, the hiring processing criteria. There is, I'm going to ask Martha, we've had some discussions with.
We have to make a motion.
I think
Oh,
we should,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
sorry.
good
Yeah, I
point.
just want to make sure.
All right, is there a motion to approve the IASB Press 102 Group 2 policies as presented?
Second.
All right, so.
All right.
Discussion?
Yeah, any discussion? So regarding that policy, we have, it is out for review, and I know we've gotten some feedback, Martha, from our attorney on this one.
Right, so just trying to clarify the issues on the agenda here. So we have one that has been through attorney review. So this one deals with asking salary and wage history. What's interesting for public employees is it is a matter of public record. What has to be clear is that salary and wage history is not sought in anything, for any reason that would be considered discriminatory. So there is a minor change on that one. There's some inserted language.
Yes.
Just in keeping with the Employment Act of 2003.
So it's not in violation of the Equal Pay Act of 2003?
Yes, there it is, yeah, and number 5. So that would be the recommended revision there. We've actually removed the salary history from our online application forms as well.
So, but the way it's stated, so we're retaining the exceptions, although there's a note that it might be in violation, or I didn't quite understand that, I guess. Violating
She
this-
actually reworded this.
Okay.
Just to sort of cite that Employee Records Act. Because this one does get fairly confusing from a legal language, and she said she would prefer the rewrite as presented there, where you can see that inserted language on number 5.
How does that affect the practice, though, of hiring someone? I mean, if you hire someone, let's say with more experience, you would expect they're going to be, in their current job, they're going to be paid more. And someone with less experience, you expect they're going to be paid less. If you don't know what they're paid, it sounds like you almost can't tailor the salary to them, right? You can say, hey, this is the salary is going to be X, and I wouldn't care if you got 20 years experience rather than 2 months. I mean,
It's all about, this is about addressing bias and gender imbalance. So I believe, that's a legitimate, when we hire anyone, and experience has always been an allowable criteria for determining salary.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought on the salary is, I completely agree. I don't think we should be asking salary because there is some sort of, can very well be underlying bias. There's also the fact that I mean, we're a school district, so we generally don't pay what the private sector pays, but when you go from job to job, it doesn't matter necessarily what you were making at your last job. It's based on, as you were saying, experience and what they know, and not necessarily what they're making before.
A lot of the people we hire are from public school districts, so it would be a matter of public record for, I would think, the majority. You would know better, Martha, about how often that happens, unless it's an administrative position.
Right, and so our salary, you know, our teacher salary is obviously based on a salary schedule, as well as that, you know, all the members of our REC. So you would, in theory, it doesn't matter what they made before, it matters where they fit on our salary schedule. And then for an administrator, we do understand a level of experience, and we would pay for a level of experience, but it's not formally formatted in that way. So I think, as Joel said, it's about removing any sense of bias, and, you know, in theory, we would have a sense of what we believe experience is worth
So then,
in hiring.
we would basically, you're saying, make a decision for someone who's not on the salary schedule based on experience and not on their salary, on a previous job salary. Does that work both ways, though, Ben? What if we say, you know, with your experience, we think you're worth X, and they come back and say, well, my last job I was making Y. We should then, I presume our policy in that case should be say that's irrelevant, right? And we're offering X. Is that kind of the?
Well, then is it, because some salaries are negotiated, right? So non-salary schedule salaries can be negotiated, so I think that becomes.
It sounds like we're opening ourselves up to bias in that sense, like it's a negative selection bias.
Well, is it if the person who offers that information? I don't think that's the problem.
Well, it's not a
We're just
problem
not asking for it.
other than that they're only going to offer that information if what they're offered is lower than what they're only going to say that if they're currently making more. So it sounds like we're only going to hear about that, you know, if we've.
But I guess my thing is that that's sort of irrelevant. I mean, it's
irrelevant for policy. I guess I'm worrying about practice, because it sounds like, you know.
Well, if they say that, I mean, any negotiation, I've never gone back and said I made this at my last job. You guys are offering too little. It's because that's, to me, that's always inconsequential. What I made, it's like what I want going forward.
Right, I agree.
And so.
I will tell you, I feel like there's a lot of nuanced language in this one. I had a fair amount of conversation with the attorney, and we ended up with this very minor edit. And she's been obviously editing this for other districts as well. And again, her important point was to make sure that our policy indicates that we in no way would have bias in our hiring process. Obviously, if there are more questions, we could take it back for additional attorney review.
I'm fine with the proposal you're going to do.
Same.
So we want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's move.
All right. So the next one is dealing with drug and alcohol. There's a lot of changes dealing with now because of cannabis is becoming legal in Illinois. And so there's a few things that I wanted to point out here. Is that Martha and I talked about it, is that we really don't have on-call staff, and so we're removing that term, on-call. And then also, we're talking about the, well, I'm going to use the exact term here, the electronic nicotine delivery system. So it's saying including, we're going to say it includes, but is not limited to anything that sort of any vaping type products.
Is that true, though? Because I thought I asked that question at the last meeting, and I think we came up, maybe there are some folks who might be considered on call.
Grounds people?
Actually, so we had a conversation with our attorney. We talked about the difference of being on call versus being available. Okay. And what we decided is, given our system, our staff are available. So I would tell you that our administrators are available to be reached in the evening in the event of a school emergency, as would our people that we talked about, specifically usually our custodial staff that might, for example, come in and plow snow very early in the morning. And we decided that they are available and not on call, because our system isn't such that we create a this week you are the administrator on call, or you are the custodian on
It's more of a
call.
physician type experience.
Yeah, right, like other institutions might have a true formal like on-call schedule, and we don't really keep that kind of schedule. We say, hey, it's snowing, we're gonna need you to be available for possible snow plowing in the morning. And so being available would mean that you would need to make sure that when you show up for work, that you are not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So she felt it was really to our benefit to consider staff not on call, but understand that people are available. It would need to then abide by the policy regulations.
Because generally also, and granted this is coming from a clinical perspective, but on call you have a schedule, and so
Right.
it rotates. And we don't have a formal schedule saying like this person's on call like Monday.
It's an
through-
expectation of the
Right.
job.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an area open to interpretation. Might there be other districts with a similar setup that adopt the on-call language? It really becomes an option. The recommendations for us are to take out the word on-call. But yeah, Dan, we did talk about it last time, and I thought, oh, there are people that are on call, but really sort of upon sort of further understanding of that definition, I think it's better to take
The way
it
you
out.
explain it makes sense.
I'm good with those changes.
All right. Any other discussion on this one? All right. So the next one is policy 720, harassment of students. And we wanted to put this on, we had some discussion on this. It's basically talking about, they go into a bit of detail here about like an investigation process, and so how that's going to be handled.
And there have been some changes around abused and neglected children, so that's one that has impacted some modifications in several of the policies.
Right.
We also felt that even though this was maybe not dramatically different, we would always want the harassment of students to fall under our, harassment of students prohibited, obviously, to fall under the, a substantively considered policy.
I thought the investigation part was pretty straightforward, but I was a little surprised with the the removal of the complaints will be kept confidential to the extent possible. Students who make good faith complaints will not be disciplined. Did that just get replaced somewhere and it's just not as clear to me, or?
Yeah, that's because they would be considered confidential, so in terms of that.
Because we have an anonymous reporting system and it's not relevant, or is that for multiple districts?
This is a press recommendation.
Right, so what
yeah.
are they getting at?
That's a good point, Wesley.
I guess I was expecting to see that moved because the enforcement part was crossed out and it says it's being like separated out below, but I didn't see any language that
No,
really.
you're right.
You do say below there, reports and complaints of harassment will be confidential to the greatest extent practicable.
No, that part is, but I think, Wesley, correct me if I'm wrong, but the students who make good faith complaints will not be disciplined. That is not, that's not, I've did not see that in the rest of, replaced elsewhere. And actually, that's a good point. I guess my thought is that I can't imagine us ever doing that. I mean, you don't do that, but do we maybe want to just keep that in the policy?
Keep out the area in red that's.
Right, right, so like the last sentence of that, so students who make good faith complaints will not be disciplined.
I mean, I think we can, what we should probably do is bring this one back, then make that edit, and then bring it
This
back.
might be a reason.
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, would it make sense then to ask press about that as well?
I think it's very hard to decide.
It's not clear in the
I
footnote why
think-
that modification was made.
No, they didn't
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought maybe it was supposed to be part of press plus one, but it just says enforcement subsection is being moved. But I didn't see that component of it being moved, so I just wasn't sure if I was overlooking something else.
Possibly it's because you can't really define good faith. Like, how do you know? I mean, it's kind of a subjective term.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I look at the whistleblowers, you can't
That's-
fire somebody who's a whistleblower.
Right, no.
And so, Yeah, I don't-
Or maybe, I mean, when you're talking about students too, like they may have felt like that shouldn't have happened, but it wasn't legally protected or whatever, so.
Yeah.
Well, I think bring it up to press first and see what the response is, and then to our attorney, because we're paying for
Yeah, every
IS.
time you talk to the attorney, you're paying for it.
Well, I guess my
Well,
They
and
usually make things very clear in their
IASB,
footnotes, and, yeah, so.
IASB needs to own their changes.
Was a big bulletin.
okay.
Good catch.
That was the other thing I noticed. I was good with all the additions, revisions, whatever you want to call them.
Good catch.
I try to be useful every now and then.
All right, so you go on to the next one?
Yep.
All right. So next one is agency and police interviews. This we wanted to bring up. I guess the one thing, I do know we have a good relationship with the police departments. The one question that I had concerns with, is it this one?
We discussed this one.
Right, we just,
Right.
we did discuss this one a lot, and I'm trying to, actually.
We talked about the making reasonable efforts to ensure that students
Right.
or parents' guardian is present during questioning, or if they're not present, ensure that the school employee is included but not limited to school social worker, psychologist, nurse, guidance counselor, or mental health professional are present during the questioning.
Right.
I know you had wondered if it should be a must as opposed to
Yes.
make reasonable efforts
Yeah,
to
I thought that
ensure.
was strange because we aren't a secondary education institution. This is younger children, and I think it would be imperative that the guardian or someone be there to
Right.
represent them.
Sorry, I'm looking for the wrong one here.
Maybe in a
I think if we were
high
to
school
change
setting.
it to must, I would want to review again with our own attorney. So must language obviously is definitive and is always and must be done. There are unique circumstances, and I can only think of one, I won't elaborate on it, but where perhaps including the parents would have been more
See, and
problematic. So
right.
those are very difficult judgment calls. It is
Yeah.
always our goal
Right.
to ensure the parent guardian is present.
And we did have that, and I guess one thing I wanted to sort of, because Martha and I did have some, just a lot of discussion on this one, is that if the request is made, if the request comes from the police or from an agency to interview the student, I would sort of like that to be a requirement that the parents, we do not let them interview the parents. Now, however, if it comes the other way around, you find something out to the student, that's a different story.
And we would also, we would limit access to students during the school day for, let's say, something that happened outside of school on a weekend and a police officer said, hey, I know he happens to be at school, he or she happens to be at school, I'd really like to interview him. We would say no, because if it's a matter of convenience, we're not going to open our door to law enforcement or even to DCFS for that matter of convenience. It's when we have that concern and we feel that something needs to happen during the school day because it's really a student safety matter. So I think this policy sort of addresses a practice, right, that we have been working on. I agree that I think we have worked really hard to have a very good relationship with our local law enforcement. And I think we have a good shared understanding of, we are dealing with young children. Sherry, as you point out, these are, at the oldest, they're middle schoolers, right? This is not a high school, this is not a beyond high school setting, obviously. So we are in loco parentis. We are going to make every effort to include a parent or guardian when situations do arise. But if there were to ever be circumstances in such a way that involving the parent guardian is either impossible or has something to do with the potential harm or safety issues related to the child, that this gives us just a little bit of gray area, the way I see it. And my guess is that's why it's worded that way in terms of making reasonable effort.
I have a question about section 5C where it says that they will make reasonable efforts to ensure a trained law enforcement officer is present to promote safe interactions and communications. Do we know if our officers locally are trained in this area?
We do know some of the officers who are trained in just sort of crisis de-escalation, working with younger children, working with children with special needs. So those tend to be areas we know that law enforcement agencies are taking on. I think we have learned sort of the officers that have worked best with some of our students when
Do
and
you
where
find that
needed.
they're normally available, those trained?
Usually, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and we know too that the village, that specifically Riverside, has been working to find more, restorative justice type methods of looking at younger people. So there is evidence that local law enforcement is towards a more understanding view of police intervention.
So are we gonna consult some?
So the question is, would you want to agree to the policy in this format with the sort of the highlights and the cross-outs, or would you want further review? So as we mentioned, David and I had a significant discussion about that, and it was specifically that make reasonable efforts versus a must kind of language, and it would be my recommendation that we keep the make reasonable efforts, but if we wanted further
I
review
don't
of
like
that.
the must, because it seems so definitive, and there might be a situation where the parent shouldn't be involved, or...
Right, and that's why I was saying if the request came from outside, if the interaction, I should say, came from outside the school, like Martha was saying, if it happened on the weekend, the police come and say, oh, we want to talk to Joey or Mary or what have you because of this. But if we find out something to the school and we make that, so I'm just wondering if there's some way we can change the wording, you know what I'm saying?
I'm just rereading it to think that through.
It might be with this always going to be some kind of, there's always the possibility of some weird circumstance that you haven't anticipated where you rationally would want to possibly interview the child, even if the parents, even if you couldn't get hold of the parents. So I kind of agree with what Linda's saying and what some other people have said, that although I think we should never interview a child with, allow the police to interview a child unless there is absolutely compelling reasons without their parents being there. I wouldn't want to rule it out of hand.
No, and at least it mentions that there would be hopefully a social worker or psychologist,
Yes,
someone
absolutely.
present.
Yeah, somebody
I
who's
would never
trained,
want that
yeah.
child
Right.
alone.
Right.
But it should be an
Scary
extremely
enough.
rare
Right.
or never
yeah.
existent
Yeah.
situation.
I'm fine with the policy as presented.
Okay.
All right.
So the next one is the policy 2:105. The big change on this one is that it's pretty much talking about board-to-board sexual harassment. And so it's basically saying that we need to engage like outside investigator for this.
And who should appoint
Right.
that investigator?
Right.
Who's the board president?
Right.
That was clear legal
Yeah,
recommendation.
that makes sense to me.
Okay, well, as the board president, I don't know that I have such an investigator in my Rolodex.
You would contact the district attorney who would help, the school district's attorney, who would help you find
Who would you rather talk to, mom or dad?
I think the big reveal here is that I have a Rolodex. I don't know, is it worth noting that we should contact the board president contacts the board attorney? Or?
Well, I should also point out too that that does reference another policy in here talking about this. I mean, like, as you know, Dan, they're sort of all interconnected, and so not that. But if it's the board president, then it's supposed to go to the
Right, I
vice
was saying,
president.
unless it's the president.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Linda has a Rolodex, I understand.
I don't have a Rolodex, but I think I could, problem solve.
Yeah.
I could find somebody who could lead me to somebody.
I would encourage you, Dan, to contact, yes, the school district attorney, and who would help you find an appropriate outside investigator.
Yeah, I'm good with those changes.
Okay.
more of a broader comment. Why is this in ethics and?
And the gift, the gift ban is such a large piece, so they
Yeah.
put it in the ethics
Yeah,
section.
And it's not really ethics. Like
It's well,
it should be like its own. It feels like it should be its own
yeah, they tacked it on.
policy rather than tacking it into something else. But whatever. Like
Yeah.
No.
that's how they want to write it. That's fine. It just seems like a weird spot to put.
It is
Well, there's a
heavy
yeah,
topic.
Right.
I think it's because this seems to be, this ethics and gift ban policy is specifically directed at board members.
Right.
And it,
Just trying to cover all bases of the board here.
I guess.
that could be the logic.
I kept reading it and I'm like, why is this here?
Yeah.
But whatever.
No, I actually had the same question myself, but I wasn't going to argue. It's like, that's where they want to put it, that's where they're going to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next one.
All right. So the next one is qualification terms and duties of the board. Again, this sort of goes back to what I was saying. It sort of ties into this one.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep.
Yep.
Fine.
All right.
So it's, if it's the president, it goes to the vice president.
It's fine.
Yep.
All right.
Makes sense.
Okay. And then the next one
What's
is,
the difference between these two? They all look identical to me, these two.
Well, the changes are the same.
yeah, the wording is very,
One's under the duty of the officer,
Right.
the board officer, and the other one is just a general ethics.
yeah, now why did they put, to your point, Wesley, why didn't they put this in that policy and just leave this one alone? I have no idea. So,
Well, it's because it's under the terms of the president, and the president has these duties except when the board president is the subject. So that's what it's talking about. So weird.
So, this one here, this policy 720, is that it's dealing with glucagon, and glucagon is for diabetes.
7270.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 7227.
7270.
7270, yes. We're almost through them, so. This, I don't, basically, the question was, do we carry glucagon? Should we carry it? We carry EpiPens, but glucagon is for diabetes. The difference, we decided no to this one for the big reason that diabetes we generally know about. It's well documented. We have policies in place here already dealing with diabetes. It's not, well, if somebody's having a diabetic attack, it can be life-threatening, but there are so many other alternatives, options that you need to get their sugar up quickly. I did run this by my wife as well, not that, who's a nurse practitioner. Where she works, they don't carry glucagon. They actually, what they do is if somebody's having a diabetic attack, they again know if somebody's is diabetic. But it's basically you get juice in them, sugar instantly, call 911. In addition, we don't, it's much more difficult to tell if somebody's actually having a diabetic attack. You don't, there's like a long list of checklist protocols you have to go through to determine if the person's really having it. So you don't really necessarily want to misdiagnose a diabetic attack. And so that's the reason. I mean, those are a number of the reasons why.
I mean, is glucagon in administering that, is that more intense, obviously, probably than the juice? I don't know.
Yeah, so it would be an injection, and it would be
Right.
for a low blood sugar
Right,
crisis.
I'm just saying
and
comparatively compared to the juice, it's a more invasive
Much more, yeah,
procedure.
yeah. And we have very good and very clear guidelines around diabetic care plans for students with diagnosed diabetes and in school, and how all of that is addressed. This is this interesting issue of an undesignated glucagon injection for a student that may or may not have diabetes. If they had diabetes, they should have a diabetes action plan, for some reason the family didn't tell us or something.
Is there any backstory or any idea why this was presented to school districts?
There's been, obviously the undesignated EpiPens was something that was very significant public conversation. It seems even likely perhaps that school districts are a place where a child may have a first ever allergic reaction, and that we know anaphylaxis is a life-threatening condition. You know, a low blood sugar situation could also be a very significant situation, but I think our sense is you would have a little more time to, you know, engage paramedics, et cetera. So I just, my sense is it came from that and sort of an outgrowth of that, but I can't say definitively that's entirely clear where.
How many diabetic children do we have in the district?
Pam?
I don't know offhand specifically. But if they are diabetics, there is a action plan that's part of the 504 plan that all who work with the student are informed of. Or if it happens to be a student with an IEP, then that's part of the IEP. And then there's a 504.
I assume it's a significant number. I know the rate of diabetes amongst children has grown, type 1 diabetes, grown at a tremendous rate over the last, 30 or 40 years. Unclear why, so I'm assuming we have a fair number.
It's not real significant, but there are a number of buildings.
It says here, though, that the supply may only be used for students with diabetes care plans already, so in the notes under there, so it wouldn't be for the undiagnosed.
Yeah, undesignated, I guess, yeah.
So it would be for only those who already have a care plan, but I support the decision.
They have the medication.
That's what I was gonna say.
At school, and if it's for some reason it's used,
Right.
it's punished by the family.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Very
for
good
your
with that.
research, Dave, and certainly support it.
All right, thanks. All right, and then.
This is the last one.
Pardon?
Last
The
one.
last one. And, well, this is, I would almost consider this minor. I just wanted to bring this to the major category, just because it's pertaining to board meetings. It's dealing with conduct at school, and it's now saying what's considered school activities is also considered a board meeting. And so I just thought we should be aware here that appropriate conduct now applies here as well.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
All right. So if there's any more comment, if we want to talk about more policies, I can go get it, but,
I think we're good.
yeah.
So are we gonna be voting on everything except for the one?
Except for 720
Yeah.
harassment of students.
Okay, do we need to make a motion to include that, or?
Do we need to exclude it?
I would just amend the motion, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to amend the motion to not include those one that you just mentioned.
7:20
Thank
harassment.
you, 7:20. I didn't have it right in front of me.
Okay, so you made the motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we will exclude that, so, do we need to rephrase that whole thing?
I would, just for clarity, rephrase it, just so it's
Okay.
clear what we're...
Yeah, so let's see, so is there a motion?
Just we have a motion on the table.
We have a motion, yes, so,
To approve everything except such and such.
All the policies in group 2 except for.
all the policies in, yes, so we are voting on, to approve all policies in group 2
And through
through you, other than policy 720, which was Q. Right, good enough.
We're all good.
Margie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right.
I was just wondering, I know we're not changing the agenda now, but as the representative from the auditing firm is here, does anybody have a problem if we move audit presentation to 5 to number 1 in new business? In regards to his time.
No, that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I'm fine with
With
that.
that? Yeah. Come forward.
Yeah, I'm assuming you don't want to.
Stay another hour.
Riveting, though.
Sorry.
Well, thank you very much. So, I brought a paper copy of the audit. I don't know if you guys have that or if you guys have yours electronically. I can go sort of based on the pages in the audit report. I'm going to try to do this sort of quickly because it's getting late and you guys also have places to be, namely home. So the first thing I just wanted to quickly go over is the management letter. It's just a front and back for me, 2 pages. It's the same comment as last year. We made some adjustments to the financial statements, which were material. And again, the one that we highlighted specifically here is that we have to make the same adjustments every year because they don't get made on the township treasurer's books. I think now that the software has changed, there may be a way to actually get that taken care of without having to pester and beg and hope. So I know that Jim and their team, they're going to look into that further. So other than that, that was the only thing that we wanted specifically to bring to the board's attention. So other than that, then there's the audit report itself. The first couple of pages after the table of contents, that's the audit opinion. Page 2 at the top is where the actual opinion is. There's some jargon about what an audit opinion is and what all this stuff is. At the top of page 2, it basically says that we issued an unqualified opinion. So in our opinion, the financial statements as presented fairly reflect the district's position. Basically, we didn't find anything, or we are not presenting anything that we think is materially misstated. The next pages 4 and 5, that is a similar opinion letter based on government auditing standards. Again, no issues with that. Then pages 6 through 13, that's the management's discussion and analysis. So if you only have 5 or 10 minutes and you decide that this is what you want to do with those 5 or 10 minutes, this is where I would spend your time. It basically highlights the key points that the rest of the audit report kind of hits over. So the things that I want to discuss specifically, the first 3 financial highlights, the net position of the district, so the assets and deferred outflows of resources that are in excess of the liabilities and deferred inflows of resources is $38,863,399, which is an increase of just over $1 million from the prior year. And then fund balance, so the government-wide financial statements are the more long-term, bigger picture. Fund financial statements are the shorter-term, more current resources picture. The net position is the government-wide, bigger-term picture. That's the one that increased by just over $1 million. The smaller term, or the smaller picture, short-term fund balances, they increased by just a little over 20,000. So basically, that one was just about break even. But as a whole, the government, the district, reported an increase of just over $1 million. There are some other financial highlights in there. If you guys have any questions on any of that, feel free to stop me. Otherwise, I will kind of go through page 7, just sort of page 7 and 8, the overview of financial statements just sort of explains what the financial statements are and what they're doing. You know, for a school district, you have your governmental funds, as I said, and the government-wide financial statements and the governmental funds, you have your education fund, operations and maintenance, transportation, so forth, which I believe Jim will actually be talking to you about 2 of those funds specifically later in what used to be point 2. So, so now it's point 3, so thank you. Page 9, there's a table sort of breaking down the net position. Page 10, there's a table breaking down the change in net position. So this is just basically a quick snapshot of the basic financial statements later. There is an analysis of the district funds that sort of goes into a little more detail of the items I highlighted previously. on page 11, the one thing I want to talk about here, the budgetary highlights for the general fund. So the 2 points here, it says that actual revenues exceeded budgeted revenues. Okay, it felt like a lot of syllables, but I think I got there. By 9.3 million about, and expenditures exceeded budgeted expenditures by about 8.5 million. So both of these are impacted by what are known as on behalf payments. So the district's portion of like TRS and THIS payments that the state actually makes on behalf of the district. For the year, as you can see there, those were 8.8 million. So in actuality, if you take those out from the general fund, actual revenues exceeded budgeted revenues by about 542,000, and actual expenditures were lower than budgeted expenditures by about 340,000. So you took in more revenue than you budgeted for, you spent less than you budgeted for. So both quote unquote favorable things for the general fund. So so that's good. Then the next couple pages talk about capital asset and debt administration. Just a quick snapshot of capital assets this year compared to last year, and then also debt from this year related to last year. Again, these are reflected as assets and liabilities in the government-wide financial statements. On the fund statements themselves, these are just presented as basically cash in or expenditures out in these cases. And then there is a brief section on economic factors and next year's budgets and rates. These items are given to us by the financial office, so that's just sort of the snapshot that they've given for next year. Questions on the MD&A portion of this? Okay. The financial statements are the next several pages. Again, these just are the larger representation of the financial highlights I hit. The net position and statement of activities, those are the government-wide financial statements. And then there's a balance sheet and statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances. Those are the fund smaller economic focus level. And then there are a couple of quick reconciliations from one to the other, so you see what the change is from one to the next. And then page 21 is the fiduciary funds section, which I will come back to briefly at the end. But this is just basically the student activity funds. So that's that. The footnotes start on page 22. Again, I'm just gonna kind of rifle through these quick. The first footnote is just the significant accounting policies of the district. They're all board approved, so hopefully you guys are at least somewhat familiar with them. The second footnote is deposits and investments. So you guys have a township treasurer again, so what your money does is sort of up to them, up to how their policies in addition to anything you can do there. Footnote 3 is again another thing about capital assets. Long-term liability is footnote 4. Interfund balances and property taxes. Excess of expenditures over budget. Again, the first one there, the general fund, we already talked about. It's not really in excess. There's just that extra on behalf piece. And then there's a couple other ones there. The important thing to note in all of these is that over expenditures were covered by available fund balance except for the fire prevention and safety fund. The expense that's in there is not actually an expense per se. It is a refund of previously collected property taxes. Basically, you guys had gotten property taxes and Cook County decided this year that they were taking some of it back. So, and you guys, I believe, had closed down essentially the Fire Prevention and Safety Fund, which is why there's nothing in there. So footnotes 8 and 9 are the pension and OPEB footnotes. So the pension footnotes are your IMRF and TRS. Just goes through how the actuaries got to your number for your pension liability. And then footnote 9 is the same thing for the OPEB liability for THIS, and then your other OPEB for anyone not covered under THIS. So that takes you through a lot of pages, and then there's a couple of footnotes at the end there. Interfund transfers, joint venture, and LADSI, risk management, contingencies. District wasn't aware of any pending litigation, and then a legal debt limitation. So that's the footnotes. You guys all look riveted. This was a good thing to have at 8:30 instead of 7:15, wasn't it? The rest of this is basically just more supplemental schedules to go with the basic financial statements that I've already talked about. I'm not really going to go into those in greater detail. The only thing I will say is that at the end on page 80, it looks like, where it starts, these are just an additional statistical section. These are tables and information, again, provided by the financial office. So this information came directly from them. We didn't necessarily audit this last section, and that's also contained in the opinion. Now, before I go, I did say I was going to go back and touch on the agency funds. There were no new government-wide pronouncements for any new standards this year, unlike last year where we had the OPEB thing come in and decide that they were going to give you a $13 million liability just because they decided that was best. Nothing like that this year. Next year, student activity funds and agency funds primarily are going to be moved from the fiduciary funds section actually onto the district's books itself. So I believe we've sent out a couple email blasts about that, so that's probably something that you guys have. There's not really a lot that you guys are going to have to do. It's still probably going to be tracked the same way. It's just going to be reported differently. So that's the big thing upcoming. But other than that, I think that's it. We had no issues working with Jim and his team. I know there was a little bit of turnover in the business office this year, but Michaela came in and she did very well. And it's always a pleasure working with you guys, even if it's a bit of a haul from where we're coming. But we're willing to make it. So if you guys have any other questions, let me know. Or
just a couple questions. One of them is on the pension liability. I don't know, at page 37, I guess 37, 38.
Okay.
You calculate in one of these tables the changes in the net pension liability if the expected return is either higher or lower than what they're assuming, which I think is 7.25%.
Correct.
And so, for example, if the returns are lower by 1%, the net pension liability you have listed is at 3.2 million versus if they get the expected return of 7.25%, it's 1.8 million. Is that right?
Correct.
So how does that liability manifest itself in terms of our annual cash flows? Does that mean we have to pony up more money if this happens? Like if the returns are low? How does that work exactly?
Generally, yes. So what it will do is, every year there is a IMRF and TRS calculate the expected rate that they'll get for the year, and then also the contribution rate that you guys will have to pay in, as well as the members have to pay in. Those things sort of take into account when they do the rates, how much you will need to give for that year or contribute for that year. So if they are consistently seeing lower returns than what they are projecting and your liability goes up considerably more, that contribution rate could change, could get higher to sort of try to mitigate that.
Okay.
So on a year-to-year basis, it's basically, as you guys pretty well know, they tell you what to pay and you pay it, unless you take specific board action to like pay in more. But obviously, there's always sort of uncertain financial times where I think if you go, see now you're making me go into the tables that I skipped. Because this one is IMRF specifically. So on page 48. Let's see, 48. Let's see. So, like 2018 was a or not this past year, but the year before, was a better year from the standpoint of investment income. You see in the 63018 column, investment income there was 1.7 million. So they, but at the same time, you'll notice the contributions are about the same. So that year was a much better year. This year, net investment income is a $560,000 loss. So they try not to change it too much, and then the liability will just sort of fluctuate. But if there's something that they're seeing significant for several years in a row, they will adjust the expected rate of return, the discount rate that they're calculating there, and B, they will probably change the contribution rate.
Right. Okay. So that could be significant if we get into we had this, we've had a very, very long bull market in equities for a very long time, probably the longest ever. And I just find their assumptions about what's going to happen going forward to be extremely optimistic. So it seems to me we should be counting on actually paying more than what's reflected in their optimistic.
Right, and you can see there too, for 3 years or 2 years ago, I guess, the total liability was about 1.25 million. Last year dropped to less than 200,000, and then this year jumped back up to 1.8 million. There, it's sort of all over the board.
Right.
In 1 year, it looks extremely optimistic, and then the next year it looks, very conservative. And as accountants, I think we kind of like to say that actuaries do their magic and they spit out numbers, and we don't necessarily agree or disagree with them, but we just report them. So, but I do agree in the sense that yes, especially in light of how this past year went, 7.25% does feel a little optimistic. But again, that's all stuff that the IMRF actuaries calculate for the entire state, and they spit out the numbers that
just sort of looking at it,
they want you to pay.
Surprising that I don't know how they could have lost it.
Right.
You would think. Granted, we have no control over what they invest in. Conservative.
Right. The other thing too, so the dates at the top, and this may actually help solve this question a little bit. The dates at the top are your fiscal year end date, so 6/30/19, 6/30/18. But the information that is given here is actually as of December 31st of the year prior. So under 6/30/19, that basically covers the period from 1/1 to 12/31 of 2018. So I think that probably took that fourth quarter of 2018 where everything sort of fell off, and right at the end there, I think that might be where that came from. So the 2018 column is actually the 2017 calendar year, which is where so maybe that makes a little more sense. Yeah. So all of calendar year 2019 is not even reflected on here yet. That'll be on next year. So hopefully that'll look the opposite again. Did you guys have any other questions?
That one internal control that was a material weakness, I guess. Just more you can elaborate on that?
Okay. So On the management letter, basically it has above the comment, there's the brief paragraph that describes what a deficiency in internal control would be or a material weakness is. So a material weakness basically means that there is an issue in internal control, something that would prevent the financial statements from being correct. It sounds harsher than it actually is for you guys, because in this case, it's not necessarily completely something in your guys' control if you also have to work with the township treasurer to fix it. But essentially what they're saying is, or what we're saying is, while we were doing the audit, the numbers that we were given, we couldn't rely on them because we had to make adjustments that we knew of because of making the adjusting entries from prior year audits that never got made in the district's financial records because they were not, because they have to go through the township treasurer, and that was not something that was done. So a lot of places, a lot of audit clients get this just because, depending on the size of the district or entity, there's things that could be missed. We're here to provide an assurance service, so our job is to make sure that the numbers are, if not right, at least reliable, and for the most part, other than that, I think we don't have too much of an issue with. The only other thing that we have is the district keeps their books on a cash basis, but is reported on an accrual basis. So we have to adjust for accounts payable, property taxes that are received in the current year versus the next year. But that's something that we
That's usual.
right. We discuss that up front. We know that that's already going to happen. So from that standpoint, we're not that worried about those being incorrect because we know we're calculating those ourselves. It's the having to go back and redo things that we've already done. That is the issue here. And like I said, now that you guys are on the software that was made in this millennium, yeah, it's possible that you guys could actually get that to get pushed through, and that won't be an issue.
All right, anything else? Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So where are we here?
We're back to number 1 on new business discussion.
I'm completely lost. All right, let's see. Here we go. Okay, yes. So project bids.
And this actually, Jim gets to come back to the podium for this one. So we just wanted to give you an overview of the process in terms of the construction bids.
So this is just a timeline of what's been happening and what's forthcoming. Starting next month, we'll probably get more thorough and detailed reports from our owner's rep that we can include with the board packet. The big thing coming up this Friday is all the bids are due to our office by 1 o'clock, and we're expecting a pretty good turnout. So we actually moved the opening itself, once they're all delivered, over to the auditorium here. So we'll take care of that Friday afternoon, and then collect them all, read them, and then we'll take them back and study them, and we'll have a meeting on the January 13th, I think, to review them, and then come forth to the board with recommendations at the next meeting. Any questions on this timeline?
No. You're good. And Jim, looks like you get the next bullet as well.
Right. So as Josh was saying, there's an interfund loan that went from O&M to transportation just about 3 years ago. and it's carried on our, you see it in the audit, but it's due within 3 years, so now's the time to pay back the loan from, so we're going to move 2.4 million from transportation to O&M. And the original resolution allows both sides. So when the board approved the loan in the first place, they also approved paying it back without having to do another resolution. And there's a journal entry that the treasurer's doing for us probably this week that will eliminate the liability on the one fund and receivable on the other. So that'll clean those up a little bit, and we're going to need the money more in O&M anyhow, so.
So worth any discussion on why that was done in the first place? Because it always seems like, yeah, that money is needed in O&M much more than transportation for this district.
I don't know for sure, but I believe that it had to do with, there used to be a cap on what you could levy in different funds, so I think we were levying more.
Sellers recommended that we make that loan because if property values continued to fall, there was a risk that we would hit the cap in the cap funds, like education, which was the bulk of our levy, and not realize everything that we could, as had happened indeed in previous years. So that was the motivation for. So the motivation was to levy more in transportation, and then loan it to education, and then.
So that we could maximize the revenue.
Yeah.
Is this the end of the? This is all, once we make this transfer, there's no more internal. This is the.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only one on the book, so it'll be a lot cleaner now. And next audit, you'll see that it's not there.
Well, and to Jeff's point, now there is no cap on the education fund, which then resolves some of the previous
So it makes it
issues.
almost impossible for the same thing to happen that happened in 2013 and 2015.
All right.
Great.
Sure.
Okay, then next is the school calendar.
So you have in front of you a draft calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. A few things about the creation of this draft. There are some things that are set by school board policy, one of those things being that we have to have a minimum of 185 days to ensure that we have 176 days of attendance, student attendance. It includes 4 institute days and 5 emergency days. There's also a few contractual things that are required by the Riverside Education Council contract. And so that is that, one of those is that there are no more than 2 consecutive institute days scheduled. So we have 2 in August prior to school starting, and then the other 2 of the 4 are in October and February, usually. We have parent-teacher conferences that are set in the contract right now, and so the contract states that the Thursday before Thanksgiving from 4 to 8 is a parent-teacher conference day with students in attendance on that day. And the following Monday from 11 to 8 is a parent-teacher conference day with students not in attendance. We, as a district, always work to line up our spring break and our winter break with Riverside Brookfield High School. So those are pretty much set by the draft calendar that they have out right now. When we build the school calendar, we look to try to maximize the number of 5-day weeks because we want to work to minimize the disruptions to the continuity of the instruction that's happening. So when looking at this calendar, those things were set in place. And then I met with a stakeholder group to discuss the following things. The start date for the school. Past practice for the start date has been that we've started school the 3rd week of August, but given that construction's stated deadline is the 14th of August, that would mean that's the 2nd week. That's the end of the 2nd week of August, so it would mean we'd start school that following week, which is not feasible. So we were looking at when would we start school then. The group talked about a few different options, and what we settled on was starting on Monday, August 31st, with those first 2 institute days being August 27th and August 28th. That would make the end of the school year, given the use of no emergency days, Wednesday, June 9th. When we talked about that, we talked about, as a stakeholder group, we had parents, teachers, administrators in that group. While parents feel that the later we start, the better, there's also concern about childcare and how that would work out if we continue to push out. The administrative perspective brought into light scheduling graduation. If we start too far late, then we go too late into June, which could affect when we're able to use RB's facilities for graduation.
Can I ask a question? Do you have graduation on a Tuesday, is that correct? This year's in the middle of the week. Where is it on this year's?
It's not on here yet,
Okay,
yes.
I was trying to figure that out if
No.
it's on here, but I didn't.
No, it's not on here yet. The October Institute Day. Past practice has been that's been on Friday. What we have seen is that other districts who are part of the West Suburban Consortium of Academic Excellence, the WSCE districts, they often have Institute Day in October, the Tuesday after Columbus Day. And so what they end up doing is they offer group professional development opportunities for some of our areas that we only have 1 or 2 staff members in that area. But we haven't been able to participate in those professional development days to the fullest extent possible. We could send people, they would just miss school that day because our Institute Day was on the Friday before Columbus Day instead of that following day. When we talked as a group, we thought it would be beneficial to try this year having it on the same day as the other WSCE districts. So that's why you notice Columbus Day is on, or Institute Day is the Tuesday after Columbus Day rather than the Friday before. The February Institute Day we left as has been past practice for the Friday prior to President's Day because that's RB's proposed Institute Day as well, and that date is often used for 8th grade articulation with the high school. So we wanted to leave that as is. So those are probably the biggest pieces of the calendar. I don't know. Do any of you have any questions?
Only just past experience as a parent that a 5-day start week in the beginning of August is hard for families only because it's a little bit of a gradual to immediate shock change that sometimes the 2-day week was, I don't know, it just seemed like it was easier to flow into it and that you did have kids that were engaged because it wasn't exhausting. I understand with construction. It's just a 5 days going to be different for everybody and
everybody in the group expressed that same sentiment. So
Yeah.
from parent to staff to administrators in the group, we all acknowledge that.
Just to keep everyone motivated that, oh, we've got a full week, it's going to be different for us.
The nice thing about this year is that most of our administrators spent the first couple of weeks on social emotional building and working on relationship developing and working on less academics in definitely that first week, and then moving into the second week also. So that is something that we would look to repeat for this upcoming year as well and not dive right in during
I think
that
it's just for the
5-day
parents too, just getting back into the routine.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Well, you know, you have kids. Was there talk about splitting the difference to like a 4 or 3-day week?
We did talk about that. We talked about starting on a Wednesday. We've talked about starting on a Thursday. So there were those different conversations, but the way it just pushes back further and further into
I understand, because if you're already starting because of construction, becomes the middle of June, but.
Right.
And actually, I have a question. What happens, what contingency plans do we have the construction, if there's delays in construction? And we don't make the 14th? I'm just something that we need to, I think, need to come up with contingency plans.
It ends up being, ends up being conversation with the construction manager, and they will provide a very detailed schedule once they start, and that is, now this doesn't absolve them, but that schedule is what they're using to track and make sure that they are complete on time. And if things start to fall apart in their schedule, then we have to start deciding what needs to be finished to start school, and it ends up,
No, I mean,
I don't know if you want to make a complete contingency plan until we're aware of how badly it's gone.
So you think we have enough time for the staff and the people getting the rooms ready? Like, we've got, what, 2 2 weeks max before construction, or after construction to get everybody in. Is it
Yes.
feasible?
Yeah, yes. I do think it's feasible. Dr. Ryan Toy and I talked about this, and I know that you also reached out to Ramesh about the date as well. So do think it's feasible. I think that as Mr. Marhol is saying, as we get closer, those are things that will finalize those details.
I know, I've been at a school through construction. It's hard to find a day when they aren't behind schedule, but we'll deal with it, I guess, and wait for the schedule.
David, my initial reaction would be that Blythe ends up being more of a home for kids than moving them straight to Ames.
No, I
And
guess.
then potentially move kids to Ames at a break.
Right, I'm not saying we come up with a contingency plan now. I think we need to at least
We're gonna
have
keep an eye on that.
like a general
Yeah.
structure of a contingency plan of what we're going to be doing, because I've never known a construction project to finish on.
They all
Sounds like that the construction manager will have that plan, that schedule to begin with, and we can, I'm sure there'll be regular reports on it.
There's some guarantees built in.
I'm sure the weather will be perfect. That's the real question, yeah.
Right, Ramesh, actually, the reasons the previous boards liked him so much is because in the 2012-2013 construction projects, he did make it happen. He had come here on the weekend and whatever, but like, he got it done. And so I'm very much hoping, though, I agree that it's, now you can never tell, that he will make it happen again. You know, and we will be done on time, so.
Project manager, he just comes up with lots of contingency plans.
It's a good thought.
High school starts the middle of the month in August. I'm just thinking about like those of us with multiple school districts. Trying to remember, do you think next year will be about the same, so we'll have a couple weeks difference?
It is about the same. I can't remember the exact date, but it is. I think it's around
So
the
instead
second
of like
week.
a 1 week difference, we'll have a 2 week
Yeah.
difference. We'll have to make sure that families, everybody knows what's happening so that they can coordinate. Great.
Yeah, as soon as this is approved, we'll start, and so this will go as an action item at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next up is residency verification process.
Can you tell how in schools, we always spend a half a year doing the school, we spend the next half of the year planning for the next year?
Yes, and this is definitely, really, it's part of, I guess, more of a continuous improvement cycle that we'll go through with a lot of processes within the district. This is just a very highly visible one because it impacts a lot of stakeholders. So when we do look at residency annually, and again, we're looking at our process, we'll review the process. We'll try to leverage any new technologies. Also reviews personnel, because oftentimes we incorporate a new technology, you end up shifting responsibilities because now somebody else is doing some task, or there are some tasks that are potentially eliminated or that change. Ultimately, what we really shoot for, the end goal, is just improving the customer experience, which in this case, the customers are our parents. These are the people that have to go through this process on an annual basis. So we're really looking at trying to make that a better experience for all of you. In looking at what those things really are, it's kind of that model of looking at process, people, product. If you couldn't tell, I'm a big fan of The Prophet. If you've ever seen that show, it's a really good show. But a lot of these changes are really just a modernization of our processes over the years. If you really look at prior to online registration, the tech department really was not involved with the registration process, other than setting up printers, during a registration period. And now we are very much tied with the business office and then largely the registrar. Although last year we added Pushcoin, which really was that modernization of our fee payment system, which also is much better integrated with our student information system and that online registration process. Well, now what we're integrating into it in looking at what's available to us from a technology standpoint is a database that allows more of an automated verification of residency to really help us focus on individuals or families that are potentially might be at a higher risk of not living in the district based on a score that is generated by the database that incorporates a lot of data points related to where people, might live, what type of public records in terms of utilities and telephone bills, and where cars are registered, and obviously mortgage information, rental information, et cetera. So in working with the business office, what we did is, and we also looked at other school districts, what other school districts are doing. We came up with a recommendation that we really feel put some new guidelines and requirements in place for residency, but does increase efficiency, puts in place a more streamlined process, and that end result of provides a better customer service experience for our stakeholder. So within the recommendation that you have in front of you, some of the big changes are that registrants who have students currently enrolled in the district and who either own or lease, which is 95.9% of our current population, would be required to complete residency and only online residency every other year. So in-person residency would not be required. There would be exceptions to that. New students entering the district, if they owned or leased within the district but have a new student entering the district, the recommendation, I'll say, was to be that they would have to come in for in-person residency. We have had some conversations in the past week or so with Dan. We talked to tech steering, and the question really became, is this actually necessary as well? If you show that, if you do have students that are currently enrolled in the district and now you're just adding one more student, what level of increased risk are we running in making you come in and verify residency? In talking with our registrar, part of it is that parents have to come in anyway because they need to bring in a birth certificate, okay? But, in looking back at even this recommendation, even allowing parents to, with a new student, to be able to do that, to not have to do a residency verification if they can just prove that they have a child within the district. And we can modify the online registration portal to take into account that. And then what would happen, as in any of the, any individual who is not having to prove residency, whether it be through the information they provided, or if for some reason there's an indication from accessing the database, if they score a particularly low score, it could be, we're not saying that it's guaranteed that you're not going to have to complete residency, but it's going to be based on these factors, which is if you've moved to a new residence within the district, we'll want to make sure that we're able to verify that, but also if you're flagged within the CLEAR database, and upon review it's determined that we want you to come in. So we could also add the new students, the new students of residents currently in the district to that formula of who only have to complete it every other year. And then registrants who'd be required to complete in-person residency annually would be all new students, including those into the early learners program, and those who are living with a resident or renting within the district boundaries but do not have a lease. And those are individuals that require, they need to complete an affidavit and submit that. And that's really, in terms of the bulk of effort historically, where we've had a higher level of scrutiny, are with in those situations. So this is the current recommendation moving forward. We do need to adjust, along with process, we need to make adjustments to our online registration system to accommodate these, and the website to make sure we're putting up the right information in time for kindergarten registration, which is March. So we really want to backtrack that a month for testing. So we're really looking at end of January, where we need to have everything pretty much set so we can go through a testing process on the registration portal. Any questions?
The only question I have is, those required health exams, like 2nd grade and 6th grade, where does that fit in? If you're only doing it every other year, when do you submit those?
If, I'm not an expert on those forms.
Yeah.
But anything, whatever the requirement is on those would need to be
You just
submitted on that
submit them
basis.
like you did before?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's really something that comes to our district office and then the nurses handle and would address.
Yeah, it was something that we submitted digitally
Right,
before.
there's certain grade levels where you have to submit.
Yeah, I would presume that the system would have maybe a different section for health forms if it's not part of the residency
Right,
portion.
yes. And we also, in looking at our website and how we have the information out there, regardless of any changes we would do this year, we're looking to improve the website just so that it's cleaner and we can direct parents to the forms that they need more quickly and just to really clean it up.
This doesn't really need to be a board action item. I mean, this is listed as a new business discussion, but as Don said, because it's broad-based, it affects all of our students and all the families. I think it's important that the board has, from a sense of sort of consensus and agreement, that we have been modifying our process a little bit every year, and our goal is to bring it more centralized into the district office, and then to continue to refine it and improve it. So I think this is, as Don's pointed out well, I think this is an improvement. We want it to be something that the board is comfortable with.
I mean, I think what you're proposing here makes sense. I like the idea of using this clear database. I'd be very curious to see how it works. I mean, in practice, if you can sort of tell us that the fraction of cases that are flagged by this that actually end up being, false positives or true positives or whatever. You're curious to see as you gain more experience with it. And also like the overall thrust of what you're talking about in terms of automating more and more of these processes rather than making them very manually intensive, which they have been historically. I'm kind of curious, is this, as you automate more and more of these processes, are we able to reduce then our business office staff accordingly because we don't need as many people to do the manual side of things?
Well, I think, annually we have hired additional support staff over the summer, okay? And that's really what we're going to look at. We also do have, where we have some gaps is in terms of Spanish-speaking personnel to accommodate, Spanish-speaking registrants. So that's something that we will look at, work with the business office to look at that.
What would be really nice is having experienced a transition to RB is that we registered in, I can't remember what month it is, that we did that for you guys. And then just a couple months later, we had to get a whole new set of documents again for RB. And I said, we just went through this. It would be really nice if they were connected. I realize they're different districts, and I don't know if that's actually legally possible, but it was an interesting experience having to do it twice and regather. And,
and I think it's something we can definitely work on. Work together.
Yeah, and I don't know if they have any interest in that or
align some of the processes. I know there really wouldn't be a sharing of data through systems, but it could be even if the timing of it helps.
Yes,
so
I just remember it being just a couple months difference, and then I said, it wasn't a huge imposition. I just remember it being strange, so we went through it again.
One thing we are looking at in some of the changes is we're trying to make
when you're a
things
freshman, you do it real early, and then you come back and do it.
occur earlier
And
than
then
in
it's
the
just in
past.
August.
Registration, our rollover process, or getting the junior high scheduled for the following year, because they're all interrelated.
Right. Yeah, it could be just a freshman issue.
But yeah, it's just, they do it early for 8th grade to figure out how many incoming freshmen they have.
I totally get it, and I understand why they wanted us to go in. I just remember saying, we're doing it again. So it'd be nice if they had that same system. Martha, do you know if our policy would need any changing with regards to this?
It wouldn't. I mean, I did review that.
Does it say anything about annual versus
It just says that we need to have a process that determines that families are legal residents and then sort of makes those exceptions for homelessness. And so it doesn't seem to have a policy in fact. It's a practice, yeah.
It's definitely a great improvement, and kudos, Don, on the updates for that. The more we can automate it, and the more we can make it, more convenient for compliance to parents, I think it's a great thing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it.
We're all ready.
Would you like to go through the audit presentation again?
No, I'd like to do the policies.
All right, sort of unrelated to any topic we talked about, which is I really do like this new logo here that you have.
I do too.
Yes.
I do
Yes.
too.
Actually, it's quite nice. Who did you say did that?
So Linda Roberto is actually our special education support staff person. She lives in Riverside also. And she's a graphic designer. She had sort of been troubled by our mixed logo use. And I went to talk to her, and she really does this. Like, she does this as a side business.
What's a nice update of the old logo,
Yeah.
and I think it's really well done. Actually.
I really
She
like
picked
it.
nice colors, and
I
she
like
did
the
it.
colors a lot.
Colors are really well done, yeah. And the
It
fonts
does look
good.
great, yes. it
Nice
is a
job,
great
Linda.
update.
I know Linda.
We'll have her watch the video.
Just tell her to watch at 9:20.
Policies, audit.
All right. Are there any additional public comment? Anyone still awake out there? All right. So, future meeting dates, January 1st, 2020, Committee of the Whole meeting is canceled. January 15th, 2020, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Board will enter into closed session at 6:30 p.m. if necessary, returning to open session at 7. February 5th, 2020, Committee of the Whole meeting, 7 p.m. at Ames School. February 19th, 2020, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Enter into closed session at 6:30 if necessary. And if there is nothing else, the meeting is adjourned.